This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 7th of December 2022 at home in Wicklow. And it is an episode dedicated to the idea that there are not enough good ideas out there in the world at the moment. So really what I'm talking about is I feel that there's been a poverty of political and social manifestos or documents, pamphlets, whatever, and that that perhaps is a reflection of the direction the world has moved in, and this episode really is me trying to have a look at that and make sense of that. And one thing I was trying to kind of get to but failed to articulate explicitly is that perhaps there hasn't been a truly revolutionary period in modern history since the 1960s. The 1960s saw huge changes in terms of civil rights and social justice, cultural changes, lifestyle changes that flew in the face of the orthodoxy of political thought and of economic thought at the time. And I'm struggling to think if there has been anything like that since, if there's been a period of time of similar impact and import. And that's 60 years ago. So I might be wrong. I mean, obviously there have been little flashpoints, and there's been social upheaval, there's been demonstrations, there's been protests, but I feel those have been isolated. There hasn't been such kind of a cohesive sense of this is the moment. This is a sort of an international zeitgeist almost that the 60s somehow represented, and we're sort of overdue something like that again. I think that's, again, I didn't explicitly get to state that, but I feel fundamentally that's where I was coming from in the episode. So yeah, you can have a listen. The first part of the episode is a bit more focused on the domestic front, the return of the female members of the household, and the integration of the new member of the household being the puppy. So there's that. But otherwise, yeah, as the episode goes on, I get into the main dish, which is, where is the intellectual rigor, the ideological rigor? Where are the ideas? Who are we listening to? Who should we be listening to? Where's it going to come from? So that's it. That's what's coming up. I hope you find time to listen, and I hope you like what you hear. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind. Keep my mojo.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. You're very welcome to this moment. The moment that you've chosen. You made the choice. You chose to press play. So you're welcome to this moment that we're sharing, whenever it is. It might be in the future. It could be in the future. You might be listening to this months from now. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, I hope you're well. I hope you're in a good moment in your life. I hope you're coping with whatever life is throwing at you, or whatever life has thrown at you. Or maybe you're anticipating something being thrown at you. A tennis ball, perhaps. Anyway, I hope you're feeling capable. I hope you're feeling resilient. I hope you're feeling confident. I hope you're feeling like you can handle it. Because I think that is the challenge. I think that continues to be the challenge. Can you handle it? And before we go any further, just take a beat. Take a beat right now. Pause. Turn off the engine. That's a metaphor. I don't mean, if you're driving your car, don't turn off the engine. That might not be appropriate at this moment. But turn off the engine, the internal engine, those manically pedaling feet, and just allow yourself, permit yourself a moment of stillness, and allow yourself just to drop down through the floor of your feet in the best possible way. This isn't a collapse. This is a pause where you're just going to let those shoulders drop. Let your thoughts drop. Let your energy sit lower and deeper in your body and feel that connection with this spinning ball that we all somehow manage to coexist on. And take a breath. Take a breath. And to borrow a phrase from a wellness content creator who I met online recently, take an intentional breath. So take a nice breath in through the nose and then release it out through the mouth. That's all I want you to do. Will you do that? Is that painful? Are you cringing? Go on, do it. You'll be fine. We've got time. There's no rush. There's no panic. Now that you're here, just stop what you're doing for a second. Sit, be still, bring the energy back into yourself. Get ownership of your energy. So maybe I'll do it with you. In through the nose. You ready? Let's do it. In. Out through the mouth. And then normal breathing again. Normal service resumes. Now, doesn't that feel even a tiny bit better? You can do that. You can do that anytime you want. That's what we forget. We forget. We just hurl ourselves into those forward circles, rolling over and over and away from ourselves, away from the ground, away from the ground, away from the ground. And we forget you can stop the bus anytime you want. We can do that. We have that power. Any place we want. All you do, if you're in company, you say, sorry, just give me a moment, please. And if you have to leave the room or turn away or just go internal, who cares? Who cares what people think? Honest to God, who cares? Do it for you. Do it for yourself. Be your own minder. That's really it. That's the mantra. I mean, it's where I'm coming from so often on this tell that is the journey through life, the journey through coping with the mundane struggles of being alive in this moment. Okay, I think I feel like we're ready to begin. I feel I benefited from that, even if you didn't. Because don't forget, if you're ever unsure, don't ever forget, I am always talking to myself. I sit here at the microphone in #blessed with no one else around, and I talk to myself, and my brain allows the possibility that there might be someone listening by the time this is out there in the world. And I go through this charade as I record that people are listening as I speak, which is completely impossible. Because it's only me. It's only me, or the little people who live in my computer. Maybe they're listening going, oh, Jesus wept. He's at it again. Please, please let it end. So there you go. Okay, listen. I'm going to... you heard that gear change, didn't you? Did you hear that gear change? I heard it. I heard it in my voice. I just went up a couple of gears. Not in top gear yet. That may or may not happen. Who knows? So let's get the party started. My girls are back. That's the big change since last week. So that's good. We have a full household again, and they met the puppy. If you were listening last week, I told you I got the girls being my wife and daughter. I got them a surprise puppy as a present for when they returned from their 5-week trip to Australia, where they were visiting my wife's family. So that went quite well. That went about as well as one could have hoped. And in this case, I am that one. So I brought them back down from the airport, weary, jet-lagged, seedy, rancid, as those 24-hour journeys can leave one feeling, particularly if one has travelled in economy class. And I just made up this ridiculous scenario, and I said, oh look, do you mind entering the house through that door? Because I've made a change to that room that's on the other side of that door, which happens to be our little utility room here at #blessed. That's where the if you don't know what a utility room is, it's where the washing machine is, and there's a dryer which we never use for fear of for fear of crashing the network of electricity, crashing the grid. Anyway, so they humoured me, and I had my little camera out on the phone to try and capture the moment. And they entered thinking that perhaps I'd done up the utility room as some sort of Christmas winter wonderland. But they opened the door, and there was that little bundle of hairy, smelly joy. Pepper, the border collie puppy, who just showered them with instant adoration. And they were thrilled, which was nice, which was lovely, which is exactly what I wanted. And then over the subsequent days, that feeling of being thrilled wore away as they're like, oh my God, this puppy is out of control. And down, Pepper. No, stop. No, bad dog. Stop it. Get down. Although, to be fair, I don't think I've heard that phrase, bad dog. I don't think that would be part of how we approach things here. Unless I'm really sitting down and trying to do a deep existential chat with the dog and going, you really are a bad dog. You are a bad, bad dog. Or even worse, you're a bad girl. A bad, bad girl, because Pepper's a she. Anyway, that is now part of the it's part of the fabric of the experience here in #blessed, and we're all finding a way. The dynamics have been lively. They have been lively. We have sort of different approaches to how we feel the dog should be broken in, so to speak, trained. I tend to lean towards the alpha dog in the pack theory, which is not, I'm just going to jump in straight away, which is not some big ego trip. I'm not trying to assert my strength and power and feed some narcissistic, trip. I just believe that's what dogs recognize and understand, that someone's in charge and someone will give them a bite or a disciplinary puck on the nose. So I don't hesitate, and it's it's effective, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like I'm couching my words. You have visions of me kicking the Lord out of this dog. No, not true. This dog is loved and cuddled and kissed. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I've never had that relationship. I've never had that relationship with a dog before. But suddenly it's your own, and I brought this dog into our little abode, into our family, into our crew, into our pack, and yeah, I feel very responsible. Anyway, there you go. So that was nice. So we're all kind of, it's a week on, more or less. The girls they arrived more or less this time last week, and jet lag is more or less dealt with, and we're trying to get back into the groove. And it's a busy time of year. It's always busy. There's stuff going on, and that's just what it is. It is what it is, and we're big Christmas fans in this house. We're looking forward to it. We got a beautiful tree yesterday. So nice. Managed to get a tree locally, paid for it, but it was not expensive, and the money was going to charity, which was really nice. There's not enough of that, I think. If you're someone who's going to go out and pay money for a tree, I mean, there's certainly been a long tradition in my family of you go and grab a tree from a field or from a forest or from wherever. I don't know if that counts as stealing trees. I don't think it does. That's just been the normal way to go about business. But I did that last year, and the trees I got weren't good. They were letdowns. They were scraggly and scratchy, and they just weren't the right kind of Christmas tree. But this year, my wife, I told her where to get them, and she brought a beautiful one home yesterday, which is great. So we put that up last night. Yet to be decorated, but it will be. That might be on the mission list today. So, how amazing for us, how fascinating and interesting. They got a Christmas tree for Christmas. They're going to decorate it later. Oh, I love how he talks about the Christmas tree. So I had to spend a bit of time before I started recording today, working out my sound levels, because the software I used to record the podcast had an update, and some of the information on the software changed, and I was just struggling to select my preferred recording level. So I think the last 2 or 3, maybe even 4 episodes, I don't know what your experience has been if you're a regular listener, but they might have been a little bit loud. And I was just trying to address that before I started to record today, which I've done. So the top end of my voice shouldn't be too loud and drown everything out. That sort of stuff is it's very annoying, a little bit challenging, frustrating, and you're on your own when you're doing something like this by yourself, and you're not really a tech person. That's me. A lot of podcasts, particularly the higher end professional podcasts, they have producers. They're there, doing their thing, and it makes a difference to the whole experience. Anyway, yes, I think there was something else in my mind as well. What was it? Oh yeah, I was going to. I mean, I'm very accepting, particularly because of the way I record this podcast, in terms of how I create an episode and how I sort of free flow with the content, usually attaching my ideas to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different areas of focus, and I try to kind of draw a thread of connectivity through those. And I think most of the time I'm pretty successful at doing that, and most of the time I manage to retain my own focus and flow through what is usually an episode of about 75 to 80 minutes. Last week I failed, and last week it really was. I mean, I kind of put the episode up and named it in a way that I felt reflected the lack of cohesion, and I think I called it a mishmash zigzag of an episode. And it was just a little bit. It was a bit woolly, a bit fudgy, and it just didn't, in my opinion, it just lacked a bit of tightness, and I just didn't. For whatever reason, I think I was just knackered when I was recording it, and just kind of getting ready for the girls to come home, and recorded it again under pressure. It just has been a busy time, and I guess I could have made the decision not to put it out, but it was a bit sloppy, and the ideas were soggy, and I really, particularly when I was trying to express myself around the conflict in the Ukraine and war, the idea of war in general, I think, I was disappointed with what I put out there. It just wasn't particularly interesting or incisive, and I just didn't put across my feelings or thoughts around that particularly well. So again, something I may revisit at another time. Okay, so that's that. Boom, done. Now, today, for some reason, I don't know where this started. But something jumped in my head a few days ago. A little flag went up. And for some reason, I was thinking of Das Kapital. Is that Karl Marx? Am I right? Am I wrong? I'm just going to double check that just to make sure I'm getting my references right. So Das Kapital. Yeah, Critique of Political Economy, book by Karl Marx. So for some reason, Das Kapital, just the title, jumped in my head. And I'm not sure what the stimulus was. I don't know what put that in there. There was something, some random comic aside in my brain in relation to something being read. I might have been thinking about my daughter. I don't know what. And because that came in my head, I thought about the Communist Manifesto, which is Engels and Marx. And I then was thinking about other political tracts, other political pamphlets, other works of political vision or social vision. I was thinking of maybe people like Thomas Hobbes, and others in that ilk. Probably a lot of thinkers from the kind of the 19th century, perhaps, and the early to mid 20th century. I was even thinking of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. These texts that lay out a vision for the world. Now, I'm not trying to set up an equivalence or a sort of a validation of Mein Kampf with other less sort of insidious or less prejudicial or less racist ideas. However, the thought occurred to me that I just found myself kind of thinking, well, where are the equivalents of those texts, those publications, those books, those ideas now? Where are they? And I guess someone like Noam Chomsky comes to mind as one of the sort of big intellectual figures of the last 40, 50 years. Maybe not even as far back as that. And obviously Chomsky has a particular leaning, a particular slant, which I'd be pretty sympathetic to. I don't know, maybe a female writer like Naomi Klein, and that's a very particular area, I suppose. And other women with sort of big ideas around what they're interested in or their vision of the world, like maybe someone like Germaine Greer, who probably has become a bit of an iconoclast at this stage. But her book was The Female Eunuch, wasn't it? These texts, that's a slight departure. Maybe that's shifting into a different area. But I just have this sense, and I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, but like I think of my father's generation, and my father would have been politically awake or politically alive, politically engaged, and very interested in politics of the left and socialism, and looking at that whole history of political and ideological and social thought that came out of Russia and I guess Germany around the sort of early 20th century through to I guess the 30s and 40s. And I suppose when my father kind of came of age, which would have been, let's say, born in 42, so say if he was 16, what was that, 58, 1960, so that kind of time when he was in college, and really engaging with those ideas. And I know that's kind of a cliche of the university student, when young people are suddenly having that intellectual awakening and they're very passionate for a brief time, and maybe those experiences or that education can shape one's politics for life. I'm not sure about that exactly. That's a theory, I suppose. I think one's politics probably get shaped by one's experiences in life, one's experience in the workplace, perhaps. Certainly, your politics will be affected by your experience in terms of what you inherit in your own family, the kind of political culture or environment that you're raised in, the values, the political values that are handed down to you. And I've certainly been influenced in that regard by my parents, who would have been alternative leaning, who would have been hippies, socially aware, socially sort of caring, and interested in ideas, and lived a lifestyle that adhered to their values, I suppose. Nothing's ever as simple as that. There's always complexity and grey areas, which is fine. But in my mind, I suppose I have this romanticized idea. And sorry, just to conclude the point I was making about my father and his generation, like that time, if you were coming of age, or certainly entering adulthood or young adulthood in the early 60s, that was around the world a time of revolution. It was a time of trying to throw off the orthodoxy, and kind of the patriarchal structures, and broaden the political and ideological sort of dialogue. And if you think about it, that was a massive shift, of course. It was a massive shift coming after the the huge conflict of the mid-20th century, the Second World War, and how that sort of altered I think it altered the consciousness of the world, of how dire and horrifying war could be, particularly as the information about the concentration camps came out. Because my understanding, unless I'm a really terrible student of history, is that information and what Hitler and the Nazi regime had been doing in terms of concentration camps or extermination camps, and the systematic attempt to eradicate the Jewish race, that really only revealed itself at the end of the war, is my understanding. And it was a real sort of, and not to be sort of glib about it, but I think it was a real oh shit moment for the world, to kind of go, did we really let this happen? Now, you would have to say, if you look through the rest of the 20th century and the various conflicts that happened around the world, and the various atrocities, the various punitive and atrocious regimes in different parts of the world, and what different dictators and leaders and institutions of power got up to, that the lessons don't get learned, and behaviour doesn't change. People who see an opportunity for power, or whose pathology or particular personality aligned with a social or political opportunity, when that falls into a particular sort of melting pot of ingredients, things can get very, very dark and sinister and extremely violent very quickly. And when that's incorporated into a sort of a sanctioned regime of, this is what is best for the country, this is what's right, and it's truly horrifying, and the most extreme crimes against humanity have been committed under those circumstances, and I think far worse and far more offensive, to my mind, than the kind of individual crimes of violence or sexual violence or whatever that historically make the headlines and make the news, and fear of serial killers and all the rest. There's something that we do around kind of conflict, and look, maybe I am recalling some of the stuff that I didn't speak about last week. And this is, in spite of how it may sound, this is a bit of a tangent this week, but there's something we do to kind of generalize that experience, to generalize the perception of conflict, and to detach ourselves. And I find it fascinating, and I'm certainly guilty of it myself. This thing of, that's happening over there, and that's between those groups, and I think I'm just gonna not get involved. And I suppose it's the there's a name for it, isn't there? The kind of the psychological thing, the bystander syndrome, or I think that's what it's called, isn't it? whereby someone simply goes, that's got nothing to do with me, I'm not involved in that, I'm going to keep moving, thanks very much, and stay on my safe little track. So don't misunderstand me when I talk about that. I'm not suggesting, I want to mobilize and get over to Ukraine and see what I can do. I'm very much not motivated in that direction. And I think that would be absurd if suddenly people were flocking all over the world to a particular conflict. Although I guess that's what happened during the Spanish Civil War, isn't it? There were a lot of idealistic and passionate young people who left their shores to go and fight against Franco and the kind of fascist regime there. And it's hard not to admire that. But conflict, particularly in the modern age, feels very muddy and very ambiguous politically. And this does return me to the main thing I want to talk about today, and what I started talking about, which is the lack of ideas, the lack of clear thinking, the lack of the expression of clear ideas, a kind of a dearth of political manifestos for the greater good, I suppose. And again, it's a very subjective term, and this is political. It is political, but I don't have a sense that people are falling over themselves at the moment, trying to go, what this person says is right. This is the vision for the future. This is how the world should be. Whereas when I think back to something like the Communist Manifesto, and again, I confess, I probably romanticize it, but I think people are like, this is a world-changing text. This is a powerful, radical, revolutionary, cohesive idea that could change everything. And to my mind, when I reflect on where we're at now in 2022 and look around the world and see what's happening politically, economically, and culturally, I suppose, I just feel that I don't feel the energy. I don't feel the energy being directed into a restructuring idea, into this is all very broken, and we need to massively rethink how we view existence and how we view coexistence on this planet. And the Marx line is, religion is the opium of the people. The great sedative, that's changed, of course, because time has changed, and the place of faith has changed over the 100 or so years since the rise of kind of communism, leftist thought. But I think the sort of the tech age, the digital age, and the rise of the rise of what the internet has allowed us to do, and the rise of how the internet has allowed us to interact with each other and how to engage with the world and to engage with with markets and to engage with opinion and voices. It's all, I don't know, is it all just, are we just awash with way too much? This, I've spoken before, I mean, I refer to the digital age, the tech age. I also refer to this time as the age of distraction and the age of, dwindling attention spans. The age of the constant click, the age of the constant looking back to the screen, and generationally, we are getting conditioned away from focus. We're getting conditioned away from reflection. We're getting conditioned away from cultivating and examining our own ideas. And it's to the massive detriment of, to the massive detriment of a sort of intellectual, political, social rigor in the area of ideas and how we're looking to sort of troubleshoot this massive worldwide crisis of economics, of wealth sharing, of power sharing, of home ownership, and then the other ones on the list I always throw in, which would be healthcare, access to education, and fundamentally what it seems to come down to me anyway is affordable baseline lifestyle. Lifestyle is a word that has certain connotations, certain associations. That's the lifestyle I want. Certain kind of aspirational ideas. But when I'm talking about like the baseline, I'm just talking about your needs being met, and your needs being meetable, graspable, without undue duress. And as far as I can tell, huge numbers of people are not in that situation. Huge numbers of people can't meet their baseline needs without a disproportionate amount of duress, stress, anxiety, conflict, personal failure, desperation, and there is. I'm amazed if you can't see or engage with an idea of profound social injustice around that. And it's not, this isn't my attempt to advocate for I don't know. I'm stopping myself saying it. I was going to say it's not my. I'm not trying to kind of advocate for a welfare state, but there is a huge part of my political belief that is like, yeah, sure. I mean, we pay tax, taxes. I'm happy for taxes to go towards making things better for everyone and more affordable for everyone, or free for everyone. I think that's a good way to spend that money. And you think in a country of Ireland's size, it should be so doable. It should be so doable. And again, my impression is that there's an awful lot of money in this country. And yet, it does seem there's a profound crisis of homelessness. There's a profound crisis of people just being priced out of life and not being able to survive. There's a fuel crisis, like a heating crisis, a power crisis. Now people would say, oh, it's just inflation and it's a cycle and it'll come down again. But I'm not sure I've ever known it to be this bad. And maybe, this is a moving scale where people go, yeah, but hold on, if you go back to the 80s when, that was a recession. They were tough times. And, sure, I mean, I was a kid in the 80s, but still, Ireland was a very different place then, which many places were 40 years ago, or however long it's been. But maybe in the 80s, Ireland didn't have so much money in it. And so the recession really did affect an awful lot of people. Whereas I feel now there is money here. There is money in the country. But a lot of people are being shut out and left behind. Now, again, one of my father's favourite cliches as he raises a defiant fist from the table is the crisis of capitalism is upon us. And I guess that idea is, the world, it's kind of like the world will eat itself. This idea of consumption. And that's, in a way, that's where I wanted to go with the alternative phrase. Instead of religion is the opium of the people, it's like consumption is the opium of the people. Can we convince enough people that they can buy their way to happiness? They can buy their way to a better life. And the struggle constantly is the accumulation of more, the accumulation of new, the accumulation of the latest. That model is still alive and kicking. That model is still alive and well. And I can't stand it. I can't stand it personally. I think there's so little value in it. It should be, and this is about changing the frame. This is about bringing in an idea that says you don't need all this stuff. You don't need all this stuff. I know there was an article I saw the other day it was a discarded Financial Times lying in a skip. And that's a phenomenon all of its own. How a thrown away newspaper is always seems to have something that is of compelling interest. I remember, when the time was when I used to have shoes to shine, shoes to polish and shine, my own. That wasn't my job. You'd lay out some newspaper and you'd always find something in the newspaper that was covered in, bits of waxy shoe polish. You'd find something that, oh, wow, I haven't read that. That's interesting. But in any case, I saw this discarded, I'm sure, the Financial Times or one of the business papers, the pink one. And it was an article about, shopping addiction and how a lot of people who are lonely or have anxiety, that's one of their coping mechanisms. And as someone who was interviewed for the article said, it's my dopamine hit. When I start thinking about what I can go and buy, all my stresses melt away. And people are getting themselves into massive, massive debt. And there seems to be a lot of shops or retail platforms, websites, whatever, that will offer this idea of buy now, pay later. And in that article, I think they were citing that industry, that buy now, pay later part of the retail industry, over the next, I think, 5 to 7 years will be worth trillions, in terms of the the financial hole that people are going to dig themselves into. So, I mean, that is in the mix, and I don't know. I'm such a poor scholar, I think, and so ill-informed, and I kind of go by these kind of broad brush strokes and instincts and my kind of scanned gleaning of, you know, how I see the situation. But, you know, there's something else in the mix when, again, you look to who are the figures of influence in the world. And I was having a go at these guys not that long ago, a couple of episodes ago. But when I think of hugely powerful and influential business people in the world today, and I go to big tech and I think of Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, and there's something fundamentally I mean, I don't want to say immoral, because I'm not kind of judging them on that front. I kind of think, like, you know, whatever. I just think, oh yeah, you're businessmen. That's it. You're businessmen. And hugely, hugely successful businessmen who have, you know, who fundamentally, I think, had one idea. If that's not too harsh. You know, the fundamental ideas were obviously Facebook, the social network idea, Amazon, the online sales idea, and in Elon Musk's case, it wasn't Elon Musk behind PayPal. So the kind of online payment system. Because I mean, like, Elon Musk didn't invent Tesla, did he? He bought it. And then has tried to kind of grow it, and anyway, and now whatever, he's taken over Twitter and doing some strange things there. But if you stop and ask yourself, even if you step back and go, I admire those men for their business kind of stratagems, I for their business acumen, I admire the business empires that they have built through, you know, chutzpah and ego and a certain amount of vision, I guess. And I suppose on a level I can step back and go, okay, I can see that as well. Like, you know, that's one person with the will and the desire and the commitment to an idea, and, you know, to go and try and make it work. I don't really know much. I don't know anything about their starting points. I don't know if they started from strong financial backgrounds or generational wealth or whatever. I mean, that can be in the mix. It's something people maybe don't always acknowledge, because there's generational opportunity, generational advantage, generational wealth, and then there's the opposite of those things: generational poverty, generational disadvantage, generational disenfranchisement, where you're never really getting the nice start that would make things so much easier. And then that's when the Thatcherites kick in, and, you know, the old pull yourself up by your bootstraps brigade begin. And it's a very disingenuous take. It's a very disingenuous take, and doesn't look at the broader picture, and doesn't look at the realities of that. And often people don't look at the realities of that because they've no sense of what those realities are, and there's a complete disconnection. And that's something that a lot of political classes are guilty of. Just no comprehension, no understanding of what it is to be at the lower ends of society. But in any case, if I go back to my three poster boys, Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, I ask myself, where are their ideas for a better world? Where are their ideas for making things better for everyone? And you might go, well, it's not they're just businessmen. They're shop owners. They're not meant to be the ideas people. But that's the bloody problem, isn't it? Because if these are the people who get celebrated and feted, and they're the people at the top of the financial pyramid, that's what people go, oh, maybe I can make a Facebook, maybe I can make an Amazon, maybe I can make a PayPal or a Tesla or whatever. And again, it reinforces that model of make something, sell something, transaction, business, accumulate, amass, rise to the top. And I don't know. You can go, well, how's that going? How's that working for everybody else? It doesn't seem to be working that well when people can't afford to heat their homes. And when that's happening in a country where there's an abundance of wealth, that's a problem. So my itch is for the ideas. Like, where are the ideas coming from? Because again, if you think of people who have huge followings and who have had or who continue to have massive profiles in the public eye and massive influence, and for example, if I take someone like Jordan Peterson, I don't think of Jordan Peterson as a great public intellectual. I think he tapped into a moment, and sort of tapped into a sort of a trigger point for woke politics around the use of personal pronouns, and it was an opportunity for quite a quirky intellectual with some pretty quirky ideas, who, from his sort of psychology background, some of that stuff I've always found pretty palatable and straightforward, and some of his other ideas less interesting. And his 12 rules, which again, as far as I could tell, was another sort of, again, a bit of a sort of, pull up your pants, fasten your belt, button your shirt, stand up straight. Very sort of old school, kind of stand up and take responsibility for your own stuff, tidy your room, have a bit of self-respect. I mean, I just didn't find anything remotely radical or revolutionary in what he was saying. And similarly, somebody like Joe Rogan, who has, again, an enormous sort of profile, presence, an enormous kind of figure of influence. But I don't see kind of the bigger picture of what's the vision, Joe? Like, where are you taking us? Let's smoke dope, let's work on our bodies, let's talk to people. I guess I'm not a dope smoker. I like to try and stay in shape. That's good. Again, I might be, I don't have any kind of big axe to grind with Joe Rogan. Some stuff that he's come out with, I've found myself going, what really, Joe? Is that, I don't know. There's something about him that I just, it doesn't appeal to me. I don't know what it is, if it's his mode of delivery, if it's the bro thing. It's very blokey, it's a bit alpha. Everyone, who doesn't agree with is a bitch. You kind of lose me right there. But it does seem that, like Peterson, for example, they've tapped into something. They've tapped into a certain anger, I feel, a certain male anger. And and have ridden it as far as they ridden it as far as they can. I mean, Joe Rogan's still doing it. Peterson, of course, has had his struggles with his own kind of mental health, and there was such a huge pile on Jordan Peterson, which I think was completely excessive. He, again, I never felt threatened by Jordan Peterson or his ideas. I think he was just saying things that weren't particularly popular. I think he had a mode of saying them that irked people who were sensitive to some of his positions. But he it feels like his moment has passed, as much as I'm sure he'll continue writing and continue speaking and continue to have a following. But he was sort of, he burned very bright for a while. But he does feel to an extent, he feels a little bit like yesterday's news. And that to me is connected to the ideas. I don't know how, if his ideas will endure beyond that moment in a deeper way. Now, I know I've got friends who are fans of the 12 rules and whatnot, and they'll go, no, I think you've misrepresented that there. So feel free to give me your thoughts. But there's something about, if those, just as those two examples I just gave, Rogan and Peterson, if they're the sort of arbiters of ideas, are the conduits for an emotional, an emotional sort of conduits for the release of profound unhappiness on some levels. And again, that might not be quite so accurate for Joe Rogan, but I think in Peterson's case it was. It's like there's something that has been sort of fermenting or percolating or bubbling in the consciousness and around the world. And I think the rise of populist politicians is connected to this as well, although Bolsonaro, I was happy to see, is no longer in power in Brazil. Trump may or may not come again. There are others like them. All of those things to me are indications of a lack of ideas, a lack of better alternatives. Why did so many people feel, yep, this guy feels like the guy? And in most of these cases, this clearly sort of egotistical, highly opinionated male figure is out there putting himself about, unafraid to be controversial, unafraid to be divisive, unafraid to have their ideas used as tools of division, and people who are clearly loving the being in the limelight, loving the position of power, and it's problematic to me. I kind of go, well, where are the other where are the other voices? Where are the other people? Where are the other ideas? Where are the other manifestos? Where are the other tracts that are lifting people and making people open up rather than kind of dig down? Because I think the culture wars and identity politics is in the mix with all of this. There's something extremely attritional that a lot of these figures have been able to sort of tap into and exploit and stir up and exacerbate, and I mean, I just don't think it's helped. I don't think it's helped. and there's been a deafening silence, as far as I can hear or not hear, in the area of, hold on a second, lads, you're thinking about this all wrong. This is where we need to be focusing. This is what we need to be looking at. These are the solutions. So it's like we need, engineers, philosophers, engineers, of social thought, engineers of social ideology and of social vision and of political vision that want to look at the broader picture of, and maybe this is why it's all so difficult, that the world has changed. It feels like it's changed very quickly. And it feels like it's changed from much more discrete political entities, much more discrete national entities, and I am talking about countries, borders, continents, geopolitical alliances, organizations. In a way, it feels like many of these institutions are no longer fit for purpose, or we have to completely rethink them and go, this, the world that was is no longer the world that is. And the world that is, partly because of the tech explosion, partly because of the acceleration that the internet has facilitated, the sort of economic, commercial acceleration, the cultural acceleration, the life-changing behavioral acceleration that technology has facilitated, has sped the world so far and fast away from what it was that the ideas can't keep up. The ideas haven't been able to keep up. But the thing is, underneath all the technological advances, underneath the screens, underneath the deluge of opinion makers, people are still the same. People still need to eat. People still need to live. People still need to be housed, educated, taken care of by a health system that can do what it's supposed to do. People still need to have the means of social, face-to-face social engagement, a means to be a part of a face-to-face human community. So underneath all these changes that have taken us into tech land and altered our brains, and made us engage, you could argue, a certain amount of agency has been taken away, depending on what you believe about how susceptible our brains are on a subconscious level to all the prompts and stimuli that have abounded from tech over the last 20 years particularly. So we've been sort of manipulated by the technology around us. This kind of ugly symbiosis that has taken place and dehumanized us, maybe to a certain extent. And again, in the poverty of that transaction, like the impoverishment of the human sense and the human experience, the sort of the technification of human engagement, that has opened a doorway for the kind of angry, divisive politics that have been able to gain such a purchase in recent years, and a sort of an assassination of a generosity of spirit that really keeps people grounded in, hold on, this is, this way of living isn't sustainable. We've got to remember that, an economic revolution is really what needs to happen. And we're maybe allowing ourselves to be just distracted again and again and again and again by everything else that's out there. Everything else that's out there. The faces and the opinions and the financial and business entities that seem to dominate international discourse to a certain level. And again, the consumerism machine keeps on rolling. And that's a huge part of the sort of the kind of the economic dynamic of the world. But I don't know. I'm not sure it's been working so well. Are you? And again, I'm speaking like a hippie, I suppose. I'm not speaking like an economist or someone who's looking at this coldly and analytically. So I apologize. I've probably missed out some key, cohesive points here that would sort of, clarify things further. But I suppose I'm just trying to express my own sense of frustration or my own sense of concern. I'm trying to raise my own flag because I think this is all massively connected to our sense of wellness, massively connected to our sense of resilience, massively connected to a sensation of being overwhelmed, of things being unmanageable, of feeling like the options are running out, feelings of defeat, and that's no way to live. That's no way to live. I do not believe in this, at this point in human history, at this point in human and social evolution, that's how people should be feeling. Things have to change. They have to change. They have to get better. Some agency has to be restored. And it is about a distribution of wealth. It's about a distribution of opportunity. And it's about leveling things a bit more and not having this massive and ever increasing gap between those that have and those that don't. But I don't know that to state the absolute obvious, I don't have a solution. I do think trying to talk about these things contributes in some minuscule way. I think it is about, part of it is connected to really engaging rigorously with your own thinking, your own ideas, and keeping a sense of what's real. And what's real is often connected to what you can afford to do and how you can afford to live and how much energy you have to expend on things that should be much easier to access, much easier to acquire, and much easier to sustain. And if there's a disproportionate amount of our energy, our physical energy and our mental energy and our emotional energy being spent on things that should come much easier to us through our own hard work or our own application, our own education, our own honesty of effort, that's a broken system. That's a broken system. And people who say they're looking after that or addressing that are failing. And the presentation of ideas and solutions is failing. We need something different. Yeah? Okay, there you go. Happy Christmas. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I hope that sort of hung together. Yeah. So there you go. That's another episode of The Clear Out, which is wellness with attitude. I think you got a bit of the attitude there, did you? I hope that breath sustained you through that somewhat political rant. I'll be back next week. It is December after all. It was December last week too, and it'll be December next week. I think the next couple of episodes, I'll be leaning more towards the festive side of things, and maybe in 2 weeks, if all goes well, I'll be able to release a Christmas episode with a bit of music and maybe a new Christmas story. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Listen, thank you so much for listening. If you got this far, I really appreciate your support, and please do use the social media links to go, I liked this episode. I like this podcast. I like this guy. I like what he does. And if you're so motivated, you can even financially support the podcast, this independent enterprise, using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. There should also be a supporter link if you're listening through Acast, which I use to present this show. So yeah, there's options. There's always options. But again, if this isn't something you feel like putting your hard-earned pound notes behind, your hard-earned euros or dollars or yen or rand or whatever, that's okay. That's okay. You know, life goes on. I'll keep doing it. But it does help to subscribe, to follow, to like, to leave a review somewhere, and to generally put something out there to share what I'm doing. If you're enjoying it, and if you don't enjoy it, just shh. Don't say anything to anyone, okay? If you can't say something nice, don't say anything. Little golden rule there. Okay, thanks for listening. Do take care of yourselves. Do look for some nice ideas, some better ideas, some revolutionary ideas, and share them with others. Engage the brain, engage your spirit, engage your will. You never know, you might start a revolution. Okay, I will talk to you next week. Have a lovely week. Do take care of yourself. Be safe, be well. All the best. See ya. Bye.